I'm Curt Dupriez, this is Chasing Cars, and regular viewers will recognise this as Santa, my Hyundai Santa Fe Calligraphy Hybrid long-termer. We've had it in the Chasing Cars garage now for almost 6 months and have travelled almost 10,000 Ks in it, so we know it really well. It also happens to be our 2025 Chasing Cars Car of the Year. This is also a Hyundai Santa Fe, and it's also our Car of the Year, and we've been driving it for a sum total of 6 days. But old no-name here is a base front drive turbo petrol, and it's easy to presume that there's not a lot in common between these two because this one is $25,000 cheaper. As twin test goes, this is a bit of a no-brainer because it answers some fundamental questions that we have about the Santa Fe breed. Like for example, what do you get for your 25 grand splurge if you're paying around 85 grand for the Calligraphy on road? And of course, with that established, what do you miss out on when you do opt for the cheapest Santa Fe configuration that money can buy? While we're at it, we'll find out how the turbo petrol engine compares with the hybrid, and do you really need all-wheel drive? And we will decide whether or not we would like to stump up the extra for the Calligraphy or go for the base version and pocket that 25 grand extra for a family holiday overseas. So let's find out, starting with the most familiar of this pair, Santa. Chasing Cars. Honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
Now, both of our examples are MY25, and at the time of filming, they're about to be updated by MY26. This brings small changes, and we will address those as we go along. Santa lobbed into the Chasing Cars garage at $76,500, but that has gone up $650 for the MY26. And in Calligraphy, you get black 20-inch wheels and a lot of satin black detailing and dual projector LEDs, which are of a higher grade than what you get on the base variant. We do like this satin paint, and it is easy to maintain. But do we think it's going to age well over time? Well, that's debatable. And do we think the Calligraphy looks 25 grand more expensive than the base version? No, we don't. In fact, personally, I do prefer the design of the 20-inch wheels of the base car. So let's check that one out next. The base car is priced from $53,250 in MY25, guys, and it has gone up $400 for MY26. This car here is around 58 and change on road. Outside, this MY25 version fits very fetching 20-inch alloys. However, these are getting downgraded to 18 inches for MY26. Boo. The base car gets silver highlights, dusk sensing LED headlights, and this creamy white paintwork is no cost. You also get nice stuff like heated power folding mirrors and a kick sensor rear electric tailgate. And it fits Hyundai's full smart suite safety bundle. Because it fits most of the same features on the outside as the Calligraphy, you could hardly call this a poverty pack. And as we said earlier, we don't think it looks any cheaper than the Calligraphy spec. But how about you? Comment below. But how does the base car stack up on the inside? Climb inside and there's certainly nothing poverty pack about the variant that Hyundai calls just Santa Fe. And case in point is the dual 12.3-inch curved screens, which are exactly the same as those that you do find further up the range. You get this neat new look leather trim wheel, which is exactly the same as the one that you get in the Calligraphy, and it frames the 12.3-inch driver screen, which does get the blind spot view monitor system that you do find elsewhere in the range. Nor did Hyundai skimp with the touchscreen media, because you do get the same 360-degree camera system as the rest of the variants. This is the base version. You also get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and the functionality is basically identical to what you'll find elsewhere. However, you only get one inductive charge pad, whereas in the Calligraphy you get two. Elsewhere you get conspicuous stuff like the dual zone climate control, as well as stuff that you can't see like 10 airbag full coverage in the cabin. And no matter where you look, there's not a lot of conspicuous penny pinching. Yes, the seats are cloth, but the driver's seat is 10-way electric, and both front seats do get seat heating. I even like the black and grey tweed trim. The whole theme in here is quite timeless and classy, and that extends to this nice woven headlining. Right, let's check out row 2. I'll save you the full blow-by-blow of the second and third rows in the Santa Fe, but I will show you what it's not missing. And it starts with the fact that you've got slide and tilt adjustment for the rear seats. You also get the nifty USB-C outlets in the backs of the front seats, and clever details like dual cup holders in the doors and air vents on the B-pillars. Access to the third row is the same right across the Santa Fe range, and row 3 does have enough room for 2 full-size adults. And boot space for the petrol versions is 642 litres, which is 14 litres up than what you get in the hybrids. Plus, even the base car fits a full-size spare. Right, let's check out the Calligraphy. Now, I'm not going to run down every single detail of the Calligraphy interior because A, that would be boring, and B, there's really not that much difference. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to point out the features that I really don't want and I haven't really used over the last 6 months. Now, this interior scheme, which is called pecan brown, is definitely more vibrant than what you'll find in the blacked out base car. And like the matte paint on the outside, you can't get this particular option in the base spec. Now, having lived for 6 months now with this space food stick interior and these Brady Bunch-like plastic fake wood inlays, I don't think it's going to age particularly well over time. Now, the Calligraphy hurdles over the regular leather of the Elite mid-spec and gets this Napa leather interior. And it does look fancy and bring a fine sense of occasion. But is it necessarily that much comfier than the cloth trim? Not really. And I also doubt that this particular colour is going to wear particularly well with family wear and tear over time. And then there's the general design. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's the tech or the materials that are used in the cabin, there's not a lot here that separates this from the base car. But how about some of those flagship features? Well, starting with a sunroof, I must say I haven't really uncovered it any time in the last 6 months. Natural voice control, never used it. Communications with the rearmost passenger using an intercom system, never tried it. The digital rear view mirror, well, I still think that's an answer to a question nobody asked. And then you get the Bose 12-speaker audio, which is pretty good, but not exactly rave-worthy. Do I really need 14 ways of driver's seat adjustment when the base car does perfectly well with 10? No, I don't. And while the colour head-up display is neat, it's not exactly essential when you've got this big 12.3-inch driver's screen. You do get server-based navigation with a smart cruise control, though I do find that the regular Google Maps in my phone works perfectly fine as it is. And the stuff that I do like seat ventilation and this second inductive charge pad, aren't really worth a small fraction of that 25 grand upcharge. In fact, all the important stuff like the big screen goodness, the dual zone climate control, and the 10 airbag coverage is all available back down on the base version. There's no added space or storage in the Calligraphy, and I must say, it's not exactly any more comforting or welcoming in here. The big difference? Well, you cannot get the 6-seat configuration with the rear captain's chairs in anything else other than the Calligraphy spec. But given that both of these are 7-seaters, that's really null and void, as there's no realistic difference in third row accommodation, and the boot space again is only different by 2%. So it really is much of a muchness at its core between these two Santa Fe competitors. But that might change when we hit the road, so let's go there next. Let's get one thing straight with Santa Fe. When you change powertrain types, you change all kinds of specifications under the skin. Much like the interior, I don't want to labour this narrative by mentioning every single spec. What's important here is how these two SUVs broadly compare. So once again, I've clocked up 10,000 Ks in this hybrid, and here's what I've found. The turbo petrol hybrid powertrain is fine enough, and it doesn't matter if you're driving around town or out on the open road, where it really gets an average of around 6.5 litres per 100. It outputs 172 kilowatts and 367 newton meters combined, and generally it's more refined than the naturally aspirated hybrid systems that you do find in Toyota competitors. But when that 1.6 litre turbo clocks on for duty, it can make quite a ruckus trying to haul along 2.1 tonnes of SUV. And that's not counting up to half a tonne of occupants. The 6-speed auto is fine, and this top-spec Calligraphy is only available with on-demand all-wheel drive. And it does pay traction dividends in slippery conditions and a worthy upgrade for regional buyers. But as the porkiest variant in the Santa Fe lineup, this does feel a bit ponderous on the road. And Santa here, which showed up in the Chasing Cars garage with 15,000 kilometres on the odometer, has never been a shining example of the breed. The steering is a bit aloof and the chassis has never really felt all that planted. And it's been a little bit noisy, be that suspension or some cabin trim squeaks. It's certainly not as tight as what I remember from the 3 examples that we did have at Car of the Year that took out the top gong. Let's see how the base variant fares, because we did name check that 2.5 litre turbo engine was a key highlight of the Car of the Year win. Right off the bat, this base Santa Fe feels quite different to drive. Part of it is weight, and that's because the base front drive petrol weighs in at 1,835 kilos, or a quarter tonne lighter than the all-wheel drive hybrid Calligraphy. Add the superior 206 kilowatts and 422 newton meters of the 2.5 litre turbo petrol car, and that equals superior performance, at least by the seat of the pants. The throttle response is sharper than the hybrid as well, so you don't need as much right foot input to drum up similar pace. The upshot is that the turbo engine doesn't work quite as hard, so it is quieter under acceleration. And that is probably the biggest surprise on road. Better yet, the 8-speed dual clutch is a smooth shifter, so it does feel more refined all round. It's not all plaudits. The turbo front driver does have more noticeable torque steer than what you find in the hybrid all-wheel drive. And wheel spin when you give it the berries, particularly when you got it in sport mode. But in general, it just doesn't feel as ponderous as our hybrid long-termer. The steering system, which feels a little bit crisper as well, is different because this gets column-mounted power steering, whereas the hybrid gets a rack-mounted design. So it feels sharper and more light through the corners, and there's certainly more to it than the fact that at 10,000 Ks, this is a fresher example than our long-termer. Regardless, mileage shouldn't affect the on-road feel. The base Santa Fe does ride a little bit firm, so it'll be interesting to see how that change to the 18-inch wheels does affect the ride. Still, our hybrid Calligraphy doesn't ride any better, and perhaps for that 25 grand upcharge, the flagship deserves some adaptive dampers. Yes, the turbo petrol is thirstier, but I much prefer this combination to drive. So the combined 8-litre consumption of the turbo petrol car that can scale up towards 10 litres around town will hit the hip pocket a little harder than the mid-6s of the hybrid, but the difference isn't as big as what we were expecting. And both of these cars are happy to run with cheapy 91 RON fuel in their 67-litre tanks. But I do know from experience that only one of these, which is that one, will make the Sydney to Melbourne jaunt on one fill with about 900 Ks of range. On the flip side though, if you do want to tow something, it's the turbo petrol that has the 2-tonne brake towing, whereas the hybrid is less at 1,650 kilos. Servicing, well, it's $2,439 for the turbo petrol and only $16 more for the hybrid across 5 years. And whichever powertrain you decide to choose, the service intervals are 12 months and every 10,000 kilometres. And of course, whichever you choose comes with a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty. Before I hand down the verdict, let's recap what the agenda is with our long-term reviews. Regular reviews and comparisons are really what we think you should buy, whereas long-term reviews are what we think about the car and whether or not we would buy it. After almost 6 months and almost 10,000 Ks under the wheels of Santa, it's been plenty of opportunity to come up with some concrete conclusions. But I can tell you that after just 6 days under the wheels of the base car, it is absolutely my preferred choice. It's the base car that demonstrates the most how much of a fine vehicle the Santa Fe is. Why? Because it demonstrates that no matter how hard you try to pull out frills and features, the inherent goodness still remains. But it's no stripper. This Hyundai manages to fit a lot of standard kit that some rivals do struggle to put in its high-spec variants. And in doing so, this base car absolutely creams the Calligraphy in value for money. That this lighter front driver packs more punch and more performance brings me to my hot take. If both of these cars were the same price, I'd still take the base car. However, I would possibly stump up the extra 3 grand to get it in all-wheel drive. So while both of these cars are our reigning car of the year, it's a simple case of the fact that the base car is more car of the year. And further, the 25 grand that I will be saving is a nice month-long holiday in Croatia for the missus and I. That's what I think, but how about you? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it, and stay tuned for our final wrap on the Calligraphy, where we do our final hits, misses, and verdict. And thanks for watching Chasing Cars.